Tea break. I don't care. I'm having a brew. Thank you. Hi. If you want even more Meccano goodness, why don't you check out my Patreon channel? And please like and subscribe and leave a comment below. I post updates in the community section, not only for this week's Patreon build, but also for what I'm currently working on. Thank you, and back to the build. Hi, and welcome back. It's strangely weird writing this script in December of 2021, because I filmed this in June of 2021. So 6 months to get round to writing for this build. Now in that time, I've also filmed and written scripts for Patreon. It's not that I've been idly doing nothing. It's just that I was trying to get some order in place to catch up with other builds. I found that in creating the channel, there were bottlenecks. First it was trying to work out where the cameras went, then attempting to build and film. Those first attempts have long since been deleted as the footage could not be used. Lighting was the next one, and even though I now have better kit, I'm not too sure if I'm using it correctly yet. Script writing was such a daunting task, mainly because I'm profoundly dyslexic, and the preset bias that I have about my own abilities when it comes to a task like writing hold me back so much more than the problem itself. And then editing it all together. I'm now at the point of filming end credits, final edits, and then launch. And then I can start to free up some data on my PC. As currently I have one very full hard drive, which reminds me I must get a backup done, because I'm tempting fate right now, and oh boy would I be screaming if I lost the hard drive now. But I wonder how many great inventions have been lost that way, whether they were written down on the back of a fag packet, sketched on a napkin, or lost on an old hard drive. Knowledge might seem to be permanent, but in fact it is very transient. We think we know things, but do we really? So keep thinking, keep learning, because once you stop, you begin to lose the abilities. The electric drill press is a 19th century invention, and one that revolutionised the workshop as we know it. The first patent for the electric drill press was filed in Melbourne in 1889 by two Australian men, James Arnott and William Blanch Brain. Even though I doubt if any of us would recognise it as a long-lost forefather to its modern-day offspring. It was, without a doubt though, the beginning of the family line. It took the company Black & Decker in the early part of the 20th century to create the first handheld power drill, operating at 110 volts and nearly 500 RPM. The tool looks more like a Flash Gordon ray gun than a tool for drilling holes. The problem then was the motor. As technology advanced, the tools became lighter and smaller. Meccano has a recurring theme in its manuals. Why design new models when pre-existing ones will do? These builds are from the 1960s, but the drill press dates back to the 1920s. So over the intervening 40 years, the design has changed some. But the basic principle of operation has not. And maybe that is a video to do one day, showing the various different models and how the drill press has changed in its lifetime. In some cases, the models will teach a method that you will need later for a larger model. That preset bias theory again. After all, if you did manage stage 1 and made it work, then there's no reason it won't work at a later stage. And that is partly what Frank Hornby was trying to achieve. Confidence. tried to show that engineering was simple. You follow the rules and it works. Regardless of what field you work in, once you have mastered the basics, you could go on to bigger, harder things that challenge you more. But the basics are still the basics. Set rules that don't change, proving, if you like, that engineering is just another science. So things can be dealt with logic. Mind you, some things did change, and in turn they would change how the model looks. In this case, it is the addition of a safety screen in front of the drill press to make the working environment a safer place. After all, it had only taken 40 years of progressive forward thinking to get workers to work smart, work safe. I do like the attachment of the magic motor to this model. It took some tinkering to get it to run smoothly, but that is something I have always enjoyed. That oiling of bearings to make mechanisms run. Which reminds me, it's about time to have a brew. And while some models were a rehash of older ones, some were not. This helicopter is one. Making its first appearance in the Meccano instruction books in the late 1950s, the helicopter was the new technology. Pre-war, there were various autogyros, a technological dead-end street that had led into a blind alleyway. The helicopter was the new thing, the aircraft that was going to revolutionise transport. In most cases, these models are based on an actual prototype, but not in this case. I have no idea which helicopter this model was inspired by. But does it need to be that accurate? After all, we know it's a helicopter. It looks like one. To say it is this model by this company would mean that it would have to be a better representation of a real aircraft. Right now it has the look and poses some difficult build problems. The model is under a lot of tension, and to maintain the shape when building it was a challenge. The sides want to be a flat profile, and getting them to remain in the shape I wanted was demanding, as the plates were defiant in their rebellious lack of compliance. And when it was finally complete, it was a fun build to make, again showing that Meccano is not all about working engineering, but also about model making. And that it has some form of playability, maybe for a younger sibling, or maybe as a project for a parent and child to build together, which is something that was lost in the 1960s reshuffle of Meccano marketing. The older manuals always showed teamwork in their artwork, normally two boys, based on Frank Hornby's sons, but then post-war 1950s, a father watching his sons proudly as they built some colossal machine. There to assist where needed, but happy to spend the time in front of the coal fire before bed with his children. In the 1960s, I imagine in an attempt to encourage more women to engineering, Meccano changed their artwork to be based more on the models that you can build with each set. For the first time in the 1970s, we see both genders playing with the set, which I think is a good thing. Engineering, like all the sciences, should not be confined to one gender. But the Italians got it right pre-war with their version of Meccano, marketed to both genders, and the artwork showing them equally working together to complete the task. Okay, I'm also a cynic in my older age. I wonder how much of that was political propaganda of the time, considering the country's ruling party, and a push that people should be working for the state. Trust the state. It knows best. The helicopter might have seemed to be the new technology of the late 1960s and early 1970s, but it might be better to say that that is the age in which it came into the spotlight of the media more, with the Vietnam War staging the first major use of the helicopter. Or did it? Courier could be argued to be the first military use of the aircraft, and again we would be wrong. The German Luftwaffe and Kriegsmarine both made use of several different models in the Second World War, as did the Allies. Now let's be clear here, I'm not talking about autogyros, of which there were several in use, but rotary lift aircraft, some of which would not look out of place a decade or two later, of which the Swarovski R5 was one. But even then we would be wrong. The first combat helicopter is the PKZ-1 and 2 in the First World War, and neither of them worked. Lack of power from the engines was one of the major problems, with the power plants overheating and burning out. The other problem was the engineering. At the time was just too complex and had to wait until after the conflict for more time. Engineering is, in its simplest form, problem solving. We can overcome any problem if we put our minds to it. And engineering is no different. But watching the latest helicopters in the air today, to the earliest attempts, if those people hadn't decided to attempt the impossible, then we wouldn't have the technology that supports us today. In my workshop is a cast iron drill press, hand operated, and a beast to move around. It is one of the tools that inspires me to want to learn more. It was cast in an era where people only dreamt of the idea of flying. It would have been an invaluable tool in its day, and is still very useful when I have need of it. Alongside it is a Black & Decker jig to take a power tool, and yes, that is the one I reach for when I need a press. But it has neither the grace nor the beauty of the 19th century one. It works very well, the engineering is simple and perfect in its functionality. But what Frank Hornby was pushing for with Meccano, and especially with the models, was trying to encourage the eye of a good finished job and to push through the problems to achieve the end goal.